Russia limits exports of noble gases. US consider lifting some China tariffs to fight inflation. Service activity in China shrinks for a third month. Saudi Arabia hikes July crude prices. Russia weapons often powered by American innovation. 733 million people have no access to electricity. Indonesia and Argentina attract digital nomads. 3,400-year-old city emerges from reservoir in Iraq.
Hello, I'm Johnny. Thank you for joining us on FUNDAY News. It's June 7th, Tuesday, and here are your top stories. Russia's Ministry of Industry and Trade announced on June 2nd, Russia has limited exports of noble gases such as neon, a key ingredient for making chips, until the end of 2022 to strengthen its market position. Deputy Trade Minister Vasily Shchepak said the move will provide an opportunity to rearrange those chains that have now been broken and build new ones. On May 30th, Russia announced that exports of noble gases will be allowed only with special state permission until December 31st.
According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Ukraine is the world's largest supplier of noble gases, including neon, krypton, and xenon, supplying about 70% of the world's neon gas and 40% of the global krypton supply. Since neon gas is used in the production of chips, the shortage would impact East Asia, where 75% of the global semiconductor manufacturing takes place. China is the next leading provider of neon gas, where the price of industrial-grade neon has increased by 9 times since the start of the war.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said on June 5th that President Joe Biden has asked his team to look at the option of lifting some tariffs on China that were put into place by former President Donald Trump to combat the current high inflation. When asked if the administration would consider ending duties on billions of dollars of imports from China, Raimondo said there are other products, household goods, bicycles, etc., and it may make sense. However, when it comes to steel and aluminum, the administration decided to keep some of those tariffs.
Raimondo said, it may make sense to lift tariffs on some goods as a way to tame the hottest inflation in almost 4 decades. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen in April suggested the U.S. is open to roll them back to help tame price growth. The tariffs of nearly $300 billion on Chinese import goods has benefited some U.S. companies from the competition. But companies that use these goods for production, for example, have suffered.
According to Caixin Services Purchasing Managers Index, China's services activity contracted for a third straight month in May, pointing to a slow recovery ahead despite the easing of some COVID lockdowns in Shanghai and neighboring cities. The Caixin Services Purchasing Managers Index rose to 41.4 in May from 36.2 in April, edging up slightly as authorities began to roll back some of the strict restrictions that have paralyzed the financial city of Shanghai and roiled global supply chains.
Analyst says weakness in the service sector, which accounts for about 60% of China's economy and half of urban jobs, is likely to persist under the government's zero-COVID policy, with contact-intensive sectors such as hotels and restaurants bearing the brunt of the fallout. Official data show China's nationwide survey-based jobless rate has climbed to 6.1% in April, the highest since February 2020. As a result, outstanding businesses backlog in the service sector will continue to grow.
Saudi Arabia, the world's top oil exporter, raised July crude oil prices on June 6th for Asian buyers to higher than expected levels amid concerns about tight supply and expectations of strong demand in summer. The official selling price for July loading, Arab light to Asia, was hiked by $2.1 a barrel from June to $6.5 a barrel over Oman Dubai quotes, just off an all-time high recorded in May. That was much higher than most market forecasts for an increase of around $1.5. Only one respondent of 6 in Reuters' poll had predicted a jump of $2.
After Saudi Arabia hiked prices, oil futures jumped on Monday, with Brent rising above $120 a barrel. signaling tight supply even after OPEC Plus agreed to accelerate output increase over the next 2 months. Media reported at least 2 refiners intend to ask for more July loading volume after Saudi Arabia hiked prices. In fact, the majority of Saudi Arabia's long-term customers across Asia are expected to draw down their contracted supply in full as a result of the surge in the refining profits.
According to the investigation conducted in May by the Conflict Armament Research in Ukraine on weapons and equipment the Russian military used in the war, the team found that almost all of the advanced Russian weaponry included parts from companies based in the US and the European Union. About half of the military-related equipment and services used by Russia were imported, with about a third coming from the US, Europe, Japan, Taiwan, Australia, and other partner governments that imposed sanctions together on Moscow.
I work with Chris and his team to design instrument payloads for his drones, the Latitude HQ-90s.
The team dissected the remnant of 3 different Russian surveillance drones, 2 of them called Orlan and Tachyon, and 1 previous unknown model that Ukraine officially called Cartograph. Inside the Orlan, they found 6 separate parts from companies with headquarters in the US, and 1 of each from the companies based in Switzerland and Japan. In the other 2 drones, they pulled parts from corporations in the US as well as in China, Germany, the Netherlands, South Korea, Sweden, and Taiwan.
The 2022 edition of Tracking SDG 7, the Energy Progress Report, shows that 733 million people still have no access to electricity, and 2.4 billion people still cook using fuels detrimental to their health and the environment. At the current rate of progress, 670 million people will remain without electricity by 2030. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a key factor in slowing progress toward universal energy access. Nearly 90 million people in Asia and Africa who had previously gained access to electricity can no longer afford to pay for their basic energy needs.
Cook stoves from different manufacturers were lit at the same time to cook the same type and quantity of rice.
The report revealed the total number of people lacking access to clean cooking fuels and technologies between 2000 and 2010 was close to 3 billion people, or 1/3 of the global population. It dropped to around 2.4 billion in 2020. The increase was primarily driven by advancement in access in large, populous countries in Asia. In contrast, the access deficient in sub-Saharan Africa has nearly doubled since 1990. Reaching a total of around 923 million people in 2020.
Indonesia's tourism minister Sandiaga Uno said on June 6th, since around 95% of surveyed digital nomads have said Indonesia is their top-of-their-mind destination for remote work and they're ready to travel, Indonesia plans to issue a special 5-year visa for remote workers and business leisure travelers to lure visitors to come to Bali and other destinations. Well, Buenos Aires has officially been using this strategy since December 2020 with a 6-month visa that can be renewed once to attract digital nomads.
You can be location independent and work from anywhere. All you need is a laptop and decent Wi-Fi.
Digital nomads are people who conduct their life in a nomadic manner, while engaging in remote work using digital telecommunication technology. A 28-year-old left Belgium with his partner to get to Argentina at the end of April as a digital nomad for about 6 months. He is not just a tourist. During the day, he continues to work remotely for 32 hours a week as a purchasing administrator for a Dutch company. Ricardo said, "I'm learning a new language, and with a European salary, life is cheap. I'll even be able to save money."
Due to the extreme drought in Iraq, German and Kurdish archaeologists were able to briefly examine the Bronze Age city which emerged from the reservoir in Iraq for 7 weeks in January and February 2020. Then the site sank again. According to initial findings, the extensive city complex with a palace and several large buildings could be the Old Zakchiku, an important center in the great empire of Mitanni from about 1550 to 1350 BC, which controlled large parts of northern Mesopotamia and ancient Syria.
The small antiquities department in The Hook is busy these days. These items are from their latest excavation under a lake formed by Mosul Dam.
In human history, Mesopotamia has been identified as having inspired some of the most important developments in human history, including the invention of the wheel, the planting of the first cereal crop, and the creation of cuneiform script, mathematics, astronomy, and agriculture. It has been known as one of the earliest civilizations to ever exist in the world. And today, Mesopotamia occupies modern Iraq. Mesopotamia is the site of the earliest development of the Neolithic Revolution from around 10,000 BC.
And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on FUNDAY News. Let's make every day a fun day. I'm Johnny Wu, your host. I will see you next time.